Hello and welcome to Tech Deals, gaming and non-gaming on the i7-2600K Sandy Bridge in 2019. How well does it hold up? Well, today I've got some benchmarks for you. I have both stock and overclocked gaming and non-gaming performance charts to show you. This is an upgraded version of my original second generation Sandy Bridge machine. There is a link to a video down in the description below showing what I've done to this computer. I've owned this since new, or at least parts of it, but this is a sort of new upgrade to the beast. I put it in a new case, I gave it new RAM, I gave it a new SSD, I gave it a new power supply, but the motherboard, CPU, and cooler are the same as they were before. So check that out if you would like to see that down there. It also contains a discussion of how I benchmark and some of the details of benchmarking, which you might find interesting and don't necessarily get covered in every video. So if you're not terribly interested in seeing the build portion of this, the benchmarking discussion is in the first part of that video. It's a long video, it's 50 minutes long, but you only have to watch about the first 10 or 15 minutes of it if you want to get the benchmarking info, and you don't actually want to watch me move all the parts from the old case to the new case. Now, if you look on the desk here, you'll see a number of RAM kits, and you will see a very fancy, very nice, very expensive video card. Let's talk about the RAM first. This system originally had these four memory modules. These are DDR3-1600 CL9 memory modules, 4 gigs each. That's what was in the machine for years and years and years. I'm not actually 100% sure if those were original to the machine, but if not, then they were put in at least 5 years ago, if not more. These are DDR3 2400 megahertz memory kits. 2 16s and 1 32. I have half of the 32 in at the moment because I test with 16 gigs of RAM. These came out of my Haswell machines. You saw one of these at the very tail end of that 50-minute video down there. I wanted to see if I could get DDR3 2400 working. It doesn't. None of these would boot. No, I changed RAM timings. I played with it. They would not boot at all. At 2133, they all worked perfectly. CL10, rather than CL11 at 2400 or CL9 at 1600, but CL10, which is a fairly decent cast latency rating for these, and 2133 provides a nice performance boost over what it was. I also have stock speeds as well as overclocked. The stock speed of this CPU is 3.8 gigahertz on all the cores while you're gaming and running programs and actually putting load on it. The overclock speed of 4.5 gigahertz is obtained by simply putting in a 45 into the BIOS and the multiplier and setting a 1.35 voltage setting down in the voltage setting for the CPU. Today's video is brought to you by Backblaze, unlimited online backup for your Mac or PC for only $6 a month. Backup your documents, photos, music, movies, unlimited files, unlimited file size, and unlimited speed, and all of your attached external hard drives as well. Restore and access your files anywhere in the world, download for free, or have drives, either USB or external hard drives, FedEx to you, and if you return them within 30 days, you get a refund of the price of the drive. So you have many different restore options. We have personally used Backblaze for more than 3 years, since before we had a YouTube channel. We love this service, we are paying customers ourselves, and we cannot recommend it enough. This right here is what makes the difference. This is what makes Backblaze superior to all the other services, up to 30 threads. We legitimately can back up all the videos and content that we make for our YouTube channel very, very quickly. None of the other services do this. Click the link in the video description below. 15-day free trial, no credit card required. See the performance for yourself. Give it a try, be happy with it, and then only subscribe once you see how impressive it really is. Now, I am aware that it's possible to overclock these faster than that. Beneath the 50-minute video down below, several people made comments saying, oh, I have one of those CPUs, it runs at 4.7 or 4.8. One guy mentioned that he has the revision of this, which is the i7-2700K, and he's running at 5 gigahertz even, with like 1.5 volts and a huge monster cooler in there. It works, but that's really pushing it, and that's also kind of winning the silicon lottery. The reason I'm testing at 4.5 is because I believe that's a speed that like 95+% of everyone who owns one of these can achieve. It is an obtainable, reasonable speed. 1.35 volts is a reasonable voltage. This is a configuration and a setup that I think will last for years and years and years to come. Getting absolute max overclocking might work for a week, but it may not be stable for years and years and years. Your mileage may vary, and I like to do what's going to be dependable, stable, and reliable for the long term rather than eking out that last 100 megahertz. I also have a 120 millimeter liquid cooler on here, and so if I really wanted to push it towards 5, I would have to upgrade that as well. That's the RAM and that's the CPU configuration. Video card. This is an Asus ROG Strix RTX 2080 Ti. This is a $1,300 video card. This video card is worth more than the rest of the entire computer combined. I want to make sure this is very clear to everybody, I do not recommend that any of you buy this graphics card for this computer. It is insane way overkill, and if you have $1,300 graphics card money, you have money to buy a better computer, in my opinion. Instead, the real reason this is here is to uplift the graphics performance to the point where we're totally CPU limited. We're seeing what the CPU can really do under ideal conditions, both stock and overclocked, and it will also allow us to see what is the true performance difference between the 2600K and the later generations of CPUs, which I'll be testing next week. The i7-4770K, the i7-7700K, both 4-core 8-thread like this, and then of course the beast, the i9-9900K, and maybe we'll throw in a Ryzen 7 2700X just for comparison's sake. We'll see how that goes, but there will be generational comparisons. And so this graphics card gives every CPU the best chance to shine, and you can see what the real performance difference is over generations. If you actually have an i7 2600K and you plan to keep it for a bit and you want to know what graphics card should I buy, RTX 2060 or a previous generation GTX 1070 or the previous generation GTX 980 Ti would all be my first choice for this level of CPU. You can get more, you can get a 2070 or 2080, or you can get a 1080 Ti, but those are all going to be CPU bottlenecked in a lot of cases. One of the comments that a number of people made in the 50-minute video is, well, this is only bottlenecked at 1080p. If you would just run at 4K, then it wouldn't be bottlenecked by the CPU. Au contraire, you might be surprised. Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1080p high is of course completely, utterly, 100% of the time CPU bottlenecked when you have this graphics card. At no time does the graphics card ever hit 100% utilization. But after all, if we were to turn 4K high detail with RTX on, then we'd be graphics card bottlenecked, right? You might be shocked. More than 50% of the time, both stock and overclocked at 4K RTX on, we're still CPU bottlenecked. Even at 4.5 gigahertz with DDR3-2133, more than 50% of the time, this is not the limit, that is. But again, you should not put this graphics card in here. This is for demonstration and theoretical testing purposes only. One of the things that I'm sure some of you are going to say is, well, why don't you put in a mid-range graphics card so we can see what it does? I might. We'll see. I might circle back around to it. I have to do the generational comparisons first, but I might circle back around and do that. Leave a comment in the comment section below and let me know what you think an ideal graphics card for this system is. One more thing. If you would like to see the actual benchmark runs that were recorded to give you the numbers you're about to see in the charts in just a second, and you would like to see real-time numbers, I'll show an example of what that looks like over here, in terms of CPU usage, temperatures, temperature stock and overclocked, how much of the graphics card was utilized. There will be another link in the video description below over to the Tech Deals gaming channel. It's over 17 minutes long, which is why it's not in this video, because I'm trying not to make this a 50-minute long video. Instead, I'm going to show you the charts and numbers and talk about what I tested, why, and the configuration and whatnot. But I do recommend that you at least go watch part of it. The games are in alphabetical order, and the name of each game is at the top of the screen, making it easy for you to scrub through the video, find the games you're interested in, and just see the performance. The MSI Afterburner real-time numbers are on the screen, and they're side-by-side scaled to 80% so you can read them both. Look at the CPU usage, look at the temperatures, look at the fan speeds, look at the power consumption, look at the clock speeds, to get a better idea of what the real-world, real-time performance is when I'm actually running these benchmarks. Those benchmarks are recorded on an external computer using an AverMedia 4K gamer capture card. Not here. There's no performance loss due to recording. In fact, this machine doesn't even know it was being recorded. The only thing running on this machine, and it did have a fresh install of Windows to be absolutely clear, completely clean install of Windows, the only thing running was the game and MSI Afterburner and absolutely nothing else. And with that being said, let's go to the benchmarks. Here are all 12 games, average frame rate, 1080p, high detail. The red bars are stock clock speeds, 3.8 gigahertz with DDR3-1600, and the blue bars are a fixed 4.5 gigahertz overclock with DDR3-2133. Yes, it is faster with the overclock. No, not massively so. I'll have a percentage chart for you here in just a minute. The slowest game on the list is Assassin's Creed Odyssey at 60 frames per second stock, 71 frames per second overclocked. Now, as I mentioned, the link in the video description below will take you to the video footage of all of these games. Yes, we are CPU bottlenecked throughout most of them, with Forza Horizon 4 being the only key exception. But otherwise, all of these games are severely bottlenecked by the CPU. But as I mentioned before, that's what the huge graphics card is for, is to allow us to see the pure CPU performance with no GPU limitations. This chart is almost the tale of two stories. The games from Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Far Cry 5, Far Cry New Dawn, Ghost Recon Wildlands, Grand Theft Auto 5, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and The Division 2 are all in the 60 to 100 frame per second range with an average about 80 or 85 frames per second. F1 2017, For Honor, Forza Horizon 4, Rainbow Six Siege, and Strange Brigade are all in the hundreds and hundreds of frames per second. So some games are severely limited by the CPU and others are not. It's very hit and miss. If you want to lift those restrictions, get a faster, more modern CPU, but if you're okay with that, then actually it's not that bad. Moving on to minimum frame rates, not all the games hold 60 frames per second, although most do. At stock speeds, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Far Cry New Dawn, Shadow of the Tomb Raider all dip below 60 frames per second. Overclocked, Assassin's Creed Odyssey dipped severely, even down to 37 frames per second. But let's be honest, it's Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It's not the most optimized title in history. Most of the rest of the games are just fine. Notice Grand Theft Auto 5? Grand Theft Auto 5 is not a new game. That came out in 2015 on the PC and several years before that on the consoles. And it only hits 65 frames per second overclocked to 4.5 gigahertz. This is throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it and just barely holding 60. So, yes, the i7-2600K works. Yes, it still plays games, but it shows its age here. Briefly, maximum frame rates. I don't think these are nearly as important as the averages and minimums, but I include them for completeness sake, and only Assassin's Creed Odyssey at stock speeds fails to break 100 frames per second. Overclocked it does, and everything else does as well. Moving on to some non-gaming benchmarks. Firestrike, TimeSpy, and Port Royale are part of 3D Mark. The VR Mark Orange Room is, of course, VR Mark, and then PC Mark 10 is the standard intermediate run in the general Windows Desktop, Windows Office Environment Media Content Creation benchmark. Now, I'll show you the percentage chart in just a second, but I think this illustrates a very interesting point about GPU versus CPU usage. Firestrike is by far the oldest test here on the screen, and it has the largest difference, 17,780 versus 20,296, because it is the most CPU bound, the least GPU demanding. That's a DirectX 11 test. TimeSpy is DirectX 12, it's more demanding, it's much more intense, and you'll notice that the difference is much, much smaller. Port Royale is the new ray tracing benchmark, and it's basically neck and neck because that particular benchmark is GPU bound, and that's what a GPU bound benchmark looks like. VR, the orange room, is the intermediate one. You can see we go back to a nice split there. It's kind of in between Firestrike and TimeSpy in terms of percentage. PassMark 10. PassMark 10, really, I could probably cover it in its own video, but in short, it tests 4 main areas: office applications, content creation, general productivity, system performance, etc. And as you can see here, you do get a performance uplift from overclocking. But I would like to point out that going from basically 4800 to basically 5500, while a performance boost, is not a mind-blowing jump. That is not such a large jump that you're going to go, whoa, I just got a new computer. It's faster, but just incrementally so. And this CPU has a much larger overclocked jump than the newer chips do, which is why I don't think modern chips are really worth the overclock bother, but that's a conversation for another day. Here's the percentage chart that I promised you. The average frame rate showed an almost exact 10% performance difference between the stock settings and the overclock settings. Remember that there's a RAM speed difference in there as well, and I think some people will just take the CPU clock speed and assume that's 100% of it. It's a lot of it, to be sure, but the RAM speed does help in some places more than others. The minimum frame rate was uplifted by 12%, and the max frame rate was uplifted by a almost 15% jump. That's pretty nice. The non-gaming performance averaged out to about 11%, but Firestrike was a lot of that. The others were a little bit less. So overclocking your machine might make you feel better. It'll make the benchmark charts look a little nicer, and you'll be able to point and say, see, I got 8 more frames per second. It's such a great improvement. It really isn't. Yes, it's faster. Yes, it's, everything runs just a little bit nicer when you overclock. But I would challenge you to run it stock and overclock blind. Have somebody else either turn the overclock on and off, launch your game, play with it for 20 minutes without any frame rate numbers or anything on the screen, turn it off, have somebody change the overclock, either add it or remove it, have you play again, and can you tell which was the before and after? I'm willing to bet that the majority of you can't. A few, but probably not many. So what do all of you think? Are those numbers what you expected? Better? Worse? Those are all built-in benchmarks, 1080p high detail. Run them on your own machine if you own any of the games and see how they compare to this. Of course, that requires that you have an RTX 2080 Ti, which you might not have. But if you're interested to see what your graphics card can do compared to this, that'll give you an idea. One of the other frequent comments that was made in that 50-minute video down below where I did the upgrade of this was, why buy Intel, buy Ryzen, replace this with a Ryzen CPU. You can do that, but I would like to point out that even a Ryzen 7 2700X single core performance, it is faster than this is single core performance at 4.5 gigahertz. But not massively so. It's not a monster upgrade in terms of per core performance. What it does have is 8 cores, 16 threads, and it does have a more modern architecture, and it has DDR4 and some other technologies. You can put NVMe drives in, so it is better, but going from an older Intel K chip to a modern Ryzen system is as much of a side grade as it is an upgrade. It is an improvement. But because it doesn't have the single core improvement that a modern Intel does, like this i9-9900K, it's more, this is nice, I can multitask more, I can stream, I can watch YouTube while playing games, I can record my gameplay without a second computer. It's just all nicer, but it won't be a, whoa, that's a whole lot faster experience. On the other hand, i9-9900K, as expensive as it is, I understand that, is that next level of performance. The single core performance boost going to 5 gigahertz. It still has the 8 core 16 threads of Ryzen, but it's got faster per core performance. It's a couple $100 more with a cooler and the chip price difference. But if you own an i7 2600K and you're currently running at 4.5 gigahertz and you're thinking of an upgrade, or you need an upgrade, or you want more RAM, or you want NVMe, or whatever, I don't know that Ryzen is going to give you that wow experience. Ryzen's a great value, and I love Ryzen. I've built many Ryzen systems on my channel. The i9-9900K is faster. How much depends upon what you're doing. Blender benchmark, for example, I've shown this in a previous video, is 27% faster. That's not a monstrous performance increase. On a whole system build, it's actually pretty decent. Just the cost of the CPUs, it's less justified. In some games, it's only 20% faster. I have seen game benchmarks that are up to 40% faster. It just depends. It's about 30%, give or take. If you're buying a $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 video card, i9. If you want a wow experience from this, i9. If you have a mid-range video card and you're okay for a smooth mid-range experience of 60 to 100 frames per second is all you're looking for, but you want a modern, smooth experience, Ryzen all day long. 144 frames per second all the time, it's Intel. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with that big huge red button below. Hit the bell notification icon next to it, or YouTube won't actually tell you when new videos come out. Hit the join button next to that if you'd like to become a member of the Deal Nation and directly support this channel. You get access to special emojis and a loyalty badge in YouTube live streams, and of course access to the private channels on the Tech Deals Discord, linked down in the video description below. Other links down in the video description to PayPal, Patreon, and Floatplane. Early access on the videos, no YouTube ads, etc. for a relatively cheap price over on Floatplane. And then Amazon, Newegg, and eBay links will also be down in the description below. And the other two videos on this, the full benchmark runs for all those games, as well as the 50-minute video showing the build and talking about benchmarks, etc. Thank you all so much for watching this. I will see you next time.